Hello world, it's Rational Pi. Now brought to you by Windows 10 with 50% less start menu and 50% less complaining about the start menu. Well, this is going to be our first video in our Let's Coding series, and as you can see, I got some new equipment. I got a microphone, a pop filter, and a new webcam, so I apologize if there's any hiccups along the way. But let's go ahead and outline kind of what we're doing here today. As you can see, I have a Microsoft Visio statement up here that's going to be regarding Hello World. And for any of you that have coded before, you know Hello World is generally the very first piece of code that any class implements their first time around, just to get people used to the idea of programming a piece of code. So, as I mentioned in our first intro video, the first video of any series is going to be about the logic. The second video is going to be implementing the logic into a piece of code. Since our program today is going to be very small, we're going to go ahead and do both of those in the same video. So as you can see here, it's a very simple flowchart. Since I'm using C++ on Visual Studio, you're going to have to include the #include statements. And then we're going to print Hello World from the main class, which is important to every piece of C++ code having a main class. And then we're going to display Hello World until a button is pressed, and then we're going to end the program. It's very simple. And what I like to do before I write code for the first time, I like to create what's called pseudocode. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with that term. And it's just a way to write down some ideas and a way that you want to write your code and utilize this logic into what a very basic code looking sort of statement. So let's go ahead and look at what I did here. As you can see, create the header files statements. If there's any other initialization, we'll go ahead and put that here. And in every piece of code in every programming language, there's always going to be some initialization. Whether it's Java, C, C++, whatever it is you're using, there's always going to be some lines of code at the beginning of the code that you're going to need to add in there. And then we're going to go ahead and start the program. And then it's going to print Hello World, keep it printed until a button is pressed, and then you're getting the program. So it's very similar to what we just did with the Visio and the flowchart. And now let's go ahead and look at what it actually looks like in C++. Very simple, 7 lines. We see the two #include statements. You see the using namespace std, which allows us to use the std statements below. We start the main class, which is required. And then you see the cout, which is the first line under the main. That's what actually prints out Hello World. And then you see the cin.ignore, which allows the Hello World to be printed on the command line until a button is pressed. And then you see return 0, which ends the code. So let's go ahead and run the code, see what it looks like. It's going to pull up the command prompt, and all you see is Hello World. Perfect. Our code worked on the first try, which even with something so simple, something might go wrong. You always want to make sure that you get everything right. Luckily, with things such as Visual Studio, it generally tells you errors beforehand, which is very, very helpful. If you use things like NetBeans or Eclipse or BlueJ, those things, or those IDEs, do those as well. So let's go ahead and press enter, and it goes back to the editor. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted it to do. So a little bit about myself with coding. This is I've been coding now for about 10 years. When I started in college, I didn't start coding until I got into college and realized what an awesome hobby and an awesome job it could be, because now I'm a software engineer myself. I'm always learning. I'm always looking to find better ways to actually code. I'm always looking for new languages to learn. So if you don't like seeing Visual Studio 2013 or you don't like seeing C++, then comment below and let me know what programming language or what IDE you'd like for me to use, and I'll try to address them as much as I possibly can. Because this is not only for me to learn, but also for you guys to be on this learning journey with me. As I mentioned, every piece of code that I write, I'm going to be putting on my GitHub account, and that's going to be Rational Pi YT. So if you want to take this code, do some crazy things with it, find a more complicated way to do Hello World, that's actually what our second video in this series is going to be. I did some scouring over the internet and tried to find the most complex version of Hello World that's out there, and I found some pretty exciting results, and we're going to go over one in our next video. And then I'm going to put that on there, and let's see how crazy and mixed up we can get it. And the lesson with that's always going to be, try to make your code that you write simple. Because the more that you try to convolute and the more you try to add to a piece of code, it ends up making it much more complicated for yourself and anybody that might take up the code later on down the assembly of the code. So you always want to try to make it as simple as possible. You want to have good documentation, good pseudocode, good logic behind the code, and that's what we're trying to teach here. So I'd always appreciate a like or a subscribe. If you have any other suggestions, please do let me know. If you have any good ideas for more equipment or more things I should download that would help with this process, also please do let me know. You can always follow me on Twitter and YouTube, or Facebook as well, and I am always open to communicating with you one-on-one directly, so you can always private message me anytime and we will get some things done. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.